If you've ever walked into a family gathering and felt the temperature drop before anyone even spoke, then you'll understand exactly where this begins. My name is Catherine Huntsberry. I'm 28 years old, and I hadn't stepped foot inside my parents' house in nearly 3 years. Not because I lived abroad or worked a job too demanding to spare a weekend. No. I stayed away because being in that house felt like being dissected under fluorescent lighting. Every flaw highlighted, every choice questioned, every dream quietly mocked. I wasn't even through the doorway when my mother looked up from the folding table, squinted at me like I was a smudge she couldn't wipe off, and said, "Didn't think you'd show your face after dropping out." 2 aunts. My mother's favorites chuckled with that brand of venom-coated gossip only relatives can perfect, like they'd been rehearsing their lines before I even arrived. I forced a small smile, the kind that politely says, "Not today, not again." Then I slid into the chair closest to the exit, a habit I never grew out of. You learn that early in my family, always know your exits, never show your weak spots. That was the Huntsberry household. You didn't flinch. You didn't talk back. And you definitely didn't expect kindness. Growing up, it was always me and my older sister, Natalie. Bright, accomplished, perfect Natalie, the golden child. Straight A's, varsity tennis, finance degree, corporate job right out of college. She got the graduation bouquet that cost more than my month's rent and my father's treasured wristwatch passed down like royalty. And then there was me, the dreamer, the creative one, the kid who wanted to build things from scratch and didn't have a 5-year plan spreadsheet ready to present at family dinners. My parents tolerated my creativity the way someone tolerates a stray cat on their porch, mildly amused, but waiting for it to leave. I lasted 2 years in college, not because I wasn't capable I was, but because I was suffocating. I had this constant itch, this feeling that I was supposed to be doing something, building something, so I left, quietly. No slammed doors, no dramatic monologue, just a simple, "I'm not going back." At first, I scraped by on freelance work design, coding, small business marketing. Then I took all of it, every skill I taught myself under stress and caffeine, and built a software product. It took off. Quietly. Surprisingly. Without my family ever noticing. My mother knew I worked on computer stuff. That was the extent of her understanding. What she never cared to understand was that I had sold a significant stake of my company mere months ago, more money than she and my father would see in one lifetime. But none of that mattered, because in their eyes, I had dropped out, and Natalie had stayed in. The family's scoreboard was simple and permanent. So when I got the handwritten invitation to Natalie's engagement party, I nearly tossed it out. It wasn't warm, it wasn't personal, it read like a summons. Just the date, location, and time. No, we'd love to see you. No hope you can make it. But the morning I walked away from a disastrous investor meeting, something in me whispered, "Go. Not for them. For yourself." And that's how I ended up standing in the middle of a rented event hall, covered in glittery gold tablecloths that shed like cheap glitter bombs, plastic champagne flutes, a buffet line of lukewarm meatballs and pasta salad that looked like it needed counseling. The moment I stepped inside, conversations dipped, eyes sharpened, and the dim light somehow felt even dimmer. My mother sat at the center table surrounded by a hive of sisters and in-laws. She stared at me like an accusation. I swallowed the sting. "Good to see you too, Mom." No one offered me a seat. No one asked how I'd been. Natalie gave me a polite half-nod, the kind you give a distant acquaintance, not a sister. Her fiancé Lucas was across the room. His coworker crowd laughed loudly at something he said. He didn't acknowledge me. I'd expected this, but expecting something doesn't make it easier to swallow. Soon the whispers began. Aunt Monica, always the loudest whisperer in the family, leaned toward my cousin and said just loud enough for me to hear. She used to be so smart. Such a waste. Uncle Rob laughed at jokes about social media millionaires who live in their mom's basement. Even my grandmother shot me the same look she gave door-to-door evangelists, and I told myself the same thing I always had. You don't need their approval. You never did. But then the shift happened. A tall man in a crisp blue shirt approached my table. "Is this seat taken?" "Go ahead," I murmured. He sat, held out his hand. "I'm Jake. I work with Lucas. I think we met once." I shook his hand. "Catherine." His eyes narrowed. "Wait. Catherine Huntsberry. As in," he blinked, breath-catching. The investor behind Kinetic. The reaction around us was instant. Conversations froze. Forks hung midair. Someone actually dropped a plastic cup. My mother's eyes widened. Natalie stiffened. Lucas choked on his drink across the room. I kept my expression neutral. That's me. Jake looked like he'd been slapped by a ghost. Lucas never mentioned that you... He stopped. Everyone was listening. I leaned back, folded my hands calmly, and said, "Funny how life works out." That was it, but it was enough. The entire room shifted like a glass cracking under pressure. Jake stammered, mumbled an apology, and fled, leaving behind a silence louder than the DJ's failed playlist transitions. My mother recovered first. She dabbed her lips delicately. "Oh, did you hear? Our little dropout is an investor. Isn't that something?" Fake smile, fake pride, real bitterness. Uncle Rob scoffed. "Must be nice tossing money into companies instead of building one." Aunt Monica laughed. "Those internet things go out of style so fast." And then they kept going, undercutting, minimizing, reshaping the narrative to keep me in the box they preferred. Luck. Coincidence. Nothing earned. Later, during family photos, my mother physically pulled Natalie to the center and told the photographer, "Make sure you get the one who made us proud." I wasn't even asked to stand in the frame. The sting wasn't about wanting their validation. It was about wanting truth just once. Only one person acknowledged it, Lucas's fiance's sister Leia, the only person in that room who'd ever been kind to me. "That was cruel," she murmured. I shrugged. "It's normal." But the damage was done. By the time the speeches started, I felt numb. By the time my father praised Natalie for never giving up, like some people, I felt my breath leave my body. And when Lucas smirked at me mid-speech, I rose silent and headed for the exit. Just as I passed the dessert table, a hand gripped my arm. Jake again, face pale, voice low. "Is it true that you bought Juniper?" I tilted my head. "Where did you hear that?" He whispered details: management oversight, private holding groups, a young strategic investor who dropped out of college. And then Lucas doesn't know, does he? I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I just walked into the night cold air burning my lungs. They thought I was the failure. And they had no idea that months ago, quietly, strategically, I had become Lucas's boss's boss. And that this was only the beginning. I didn't go home after that night. I couldn't. The cold air outside the hall slapped me awake, but not enough. The humiliation, the anger, the strange numbness, that all stayed lodged in my chest like a stone. So I drove. No GPS, no destination. Just headlights carving through dark back roads while my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I don't remember how long I drove before I ended up at the overlook just outside town. The one where Natalie and I used to bike to when we were little. Back then it felt magical, like a secret place where wishes might come true if you whispered them softly enough. Now the wooden railings were rusted, the trees thinner, the view hazier. But the silence was the same. I sat on the hood of my car, letting the cold seep into my bones until my fingers went numb. Below me, the town glittered like a bowl of scattered stars, oblivious to the war I'd just walked away from. And I thought about everything. Natalie's smug smile. My father's cutting glance, my mother's voice dripping with disappointment, Lucas's smirk, Jake's fear when he realized the truth. Under all of that deeper and quieter, I thought about the moment he'd whispered, "Lucas doesn't know." That should have given me some satisfaction, but it didn't. All I felt was tired, bone-deep tired, like I'd been carrying a weight I didn't notice until it finally crushed me. That night wasn't just an engagement party. It was the funeral of whatever last sliver of me still wanted their approval. I didn't sleep. I don't think I even tried. The next morning was a blur of autopilot motions, shower, coffee, emails, meetings. A life lived on muscle memory. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from board members, most of them variants of, "Did you stop by the Juniper office? Is there something we should be aware of?" Jake must have talked. I gave vague replies, letting the mystery swirl. Let them wonder. Let Lucas sweat. But something inside me had shifted. For years, I'd chased success like it was oxygen, desperately hoping that if I climbed high enough, worked hard enough, achieved enough, maybe, just maybe, my family would stop looking down on me. That night killed that delusion. And somehow, strangely, that felt freeing. But freedom doesn't mean healed. The emotional crash hit like a slow-moving avalanche. At first, it was little things: skipping meals, leaving texts unanswered, forgetting what day it was, opening my laptop only to stare at my code editor until the screen blurred. The things that used to excite me, feature launches, user growth, investor calls, felt distant, muted, like someone had lowered the volume on my life. Days blurred into each other. I stopped going to the gym, stopped cooking, stopped caring. My apartment became a reflection of my mind. Dishes piled up laundry, overflowing unopened mail, gathering dust. One night, I found myself lying on the couch, fully clothed, TV on, but muted, staring at the ceiling fan spinning like time I couldn't catch up to. It was 2 a.m. I hadn't moved in hours. That was rock bottom. And rock bottom isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's quiet, still. Like you're suspended in water, unable to swim or sink. But rock bottom is also honest. It strips everything away until the only thing left is truth. My truth was simple. I didn't need their approval. I never did. It didn't fix me overnight, but it gave me a starting point. The next morning I showered, made my bed. That tiny act felt like climbing a mountain. The day after that, I forced myself out of the apartment, went to a small coffee shop, didn't speak to anyone, just opened my laptop and let the hum of strangers pry me out of isolation. The cursor blinked at me, judgmental as always. But something inside me finally stirred. I opened my app dashboard, checked user analytics, something I hadn't done properly in weeks, and noticed something, an unexpected uptick in traffic from small businesses in the education sector. A spark, small but real. Then I opened a notebook I hadn't touched in months and started journaling. Not beautifully, not poetically, just writing whatever came out. Today I feel invisible. I hate my family. I'm so tired. I felt a little better this morning. One user said the app saved them 4 hours this week. Tiny entries, raw honesty, little flickers of life. And slowly, very slowly, something inside me began to thaw. A few days later, a familiar name popped up on my phone. Theo, an old friend from college who had also dropped out. He started a company in Austin. We hopped on a Zoom call, no agenda, no false cheer. Just two tired people catching up. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You're trying to win a game they rigged, so stop playing their game." That line didn't just stick, it rooted itself in my mind like a seed. I thought about it during every board meeting, every email I softened to sound professional, every hesitation before proposing an idea. Eventually, I stopped imagining what my family would think, stopped shaping myself around their judgments. And I started building differently. I hired a small content team, brought in a head of product, delegated responsibilities I'd been hoarding out of fear, allowed myself to breathe. My work became lighter, cleaner, more intentional. I checked in on the Juniper division, the company where Lucas worked, and ordered a confidential audit of department heads. Not a personal attack, just data. His name appeared exactly where I expected it to. Lucas Whitford scores 62%, well below the company average of 81%. Comments included: resistant to feedback, rigid management style, struggles with team cohesion, talks over junior employees, undervalues contributions from women. A junior developer named Priya had written, "Whenever I propose a feature, he calls it unrealistic. When a male coworker suggests the same thing, he says it's innovative." That hit deeper than I expected, because I had been Priya, silenced, dismissed, overlooked. But now I own the table everyone else once pushed me away from. This wasn't revenge. This was clarity. And clarity changes everything. I sat with the report in silence, letting its weight settle. Lucas wasn't going to see this coming. Not from me. Not from the dropout he'd barely acknowledged at his engagement party. But I saw him clearly now. And soon, the whole company would too. The morning after I reviewed Lucas's audit, something inside me clicked into place. Not anger, not vengeance. Something colder, clearer. A kind of quiet resolve that comes when you realize you've spent your whole life apologizing, shrinking, contorting yourself into shapes that made everyone else more comfortable, and suddenly you're done. I closed my laptop with a soft snap. It was time to stop reacting. Time to start leading. My first move was reaching out to Taylor Singh, the interim VP of product at Juniper and the highest-ranking woman in the division. I'd seen her name on countless progress reports, heard the muted praise in board meetings. Everyone acknowledged she was talented, but no one actually gave her space to lead, because Lucas and people like him took up all the air in the room. I emailed her assistant and requested an off-site coffee meeting. Neutral ground, no corporate walls, no hierarchy. She arrived wearing jeans, a leather jacket, and exhaustion that clung to her like a second skin. Anyone who's worked in tech long enough recognizes that look the combination of brilliance and burnout. "I'll be honest," she said, crossing her arms as she sat. "Investors don't usually ask for face-to-face meetings, not unless something's on fire." I stirred my coffee. Maybe something is. She studied me, sharp, perceptive. "You're not just an investor," she said slowly. "Are you?" I smiled. "I'm not." Her eyebrow lifted. A silent "go on." I leaned forward. "Tell me about your team. Not the numbers. The people." Something complicated flickered in her eyes. She hesitated, then exhaled. They're good. Very good. But they're frustrated. Half feel ignored. The other half are being micromanaged. There's no cohesion, no trust. She paused. Under certain leadership styles, talent withers. Lucas, I asked, even though I already knew. She didn't flinch, but her jaw tightened. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Her fingers tapped her coffee cup, nervous energy barely contained. He isn't malicious, she said. Just conditioned. He inherited a mindset that rewards control over collaboration. You know the type. I did. I'd grown up with it. I'd been belittled by it, dismissed by it, defined by it. If you had the power, I asked gently, to restructure your department tomorrow your way, what would you change? She blinked. Are you seriously asking me that? Yes. Why? Because someone who understands this company from the inside should be calling the shots. For a long moment, she just stared at me. Then, barely above a whisper, you're the majority stakeholder, aren't you? I didn't confirm it. I didn't deny it. I simply took a slow sip of my coffee. Her eyes widened. Her posture straightened. Everything clicked into place. What do you need from me? She asked. Nothing yet, I said. But soon I'll ask you to do something bold. When that moment comes, I need to know you're ready. She nodded, firm and steady. I'm in. The first domino fell. The second was HR. I contacted Karen, the senior HR lead at Juniper, known for her impeccable documentation and quiet integrity. I asked for a confidential file review, employee complaints, performance logs, sentiment, surveys, email patterns. Nothing illegal, nothing invasive, just the truth. When the file landed in my inbox, it was worse than I expected. Lucas had accumulated more internal complaints in 18 months than any other department head. Individually, none were enough for formal action. Together, they painted a picture of someone who crushed creativity under pressure, dismissed junior employees, and undermined women in subtle but consistent ways. One line from a junior dev named Priya made my stomach twist. I stopped offering ideas. He never listens unless a man says it. That was it, the moment the professional merged with the personal. I had spent years fighting to be heard, ignored by people who already decided who I was. And now I held the power to prevent that from happening to others. Lucas wasn't just bad at his job. He was replicating the dynamics I'd escaped from. Not anymore. My next step was the board. Quiet conversations, private Zoom calls, strategic suggestions disguised as gentle inquiries. I didn't name Lucas directly. I didn't need to. Instead, I framed the bigger picture. Juniper has stalled in innovation. Certain leadership is resistant to collaboration. But departments led by people like Taylor are exceeding targets. Boards eat that language like dessert. Growth, momentum, efficiency, collaboration. They approved the restructuring as if it had been their idea. I called my lawyer. I want to redesign the leadership tier, I said. Not a demotion, a realignment. Create oversight roles that sit above all department heads, Lucas included. Taylor will be one of them. This will dilute his authority, my lawyer said. Yes, I answered, without technically changing his title. He took a beat. Subtle, calculated, legal. Exactly. He drafted the proposal. I signed it. It went into motion. The second domino fell. But the third domino, the third was personal. My family. I had not spoken to them since the engagement party. Not a word. And honestly, it was peaceful. Then an unexpected email arrived from Laya Lucas's fiancé. Not formal, not long. Just a photo of a handwritten note. I don't know what happened between you and Lucas, but I think you're stronger than anyone ever gave you credit for. Just thought you should know. I stared at it for an hour, and then another. Kindness hits differently when you've lived on scraps of it. I knew what was coming. The restructure would be public within a week. Lucas would find out. He'd panic. He'd go running to his family, who would go running to mine. They'd circle their wagons like they always did. So I prepared the ground. I called the one person in the family who could spread information faster than wildfire, Aunt Rachel, the Huntsberry Gossip Network CEO. We met at a cafe. I played it casual neutral. I've been working on some big restructuring, I told her calmly. One of the department heads has been underperforming. Her eyes gleamed. Anyone we know. I let a small smile curl on my lips. Let's just say he once told me I'd never understand business because I dropped out. She choked on her mimosa. I paid the bill and left. By dinner, my cousin texted, "You just broke the family group chat." Good. Let them whisper. Let them speculate. Let them stew in the narrative they could no longer control. Because soon, Lucas would learn the truth. That the woman they all mocked, dismissed, patronized, had quietly taken control of the company he believed he ruled. And I wanted every single person who ever looked down on me to see the truth clearly. Not out of spite, out of clarity. The dominoes weren't falling, I was pushing them. And Lucas's fall was next. 3 days after the restructuring went public, the first cracks appeared. Juniper's internal memo had barely circulated when Lucas stormed into Taylor's office, red-faced and furious, demanding an explanation. He accused her of staging a power grab, undermining him, sabotaging his leadership. He didn't realize, or maybe he did, which made it worse, that the memo carried my approval signature at the bottom. For the first time in his career, he wasn't in control, and Lucas Goldenboy of corporate charm had no idea how to function without authority propping him up. Updates trickled into my inbox from Slack channels, forwarded messages, and HR notes. He argued in meetings, interrupted calls, sent contradictory directives to undermine Taylor's decisions, tried to host a team retreat, an expensive one without approval, tried passing off spa packages as team morale expenses. The unraveling had begun. I watched all of it from my home office 3 states away, sipping matcha like it was any other workday. And then the final blow landed. HR issued a formal reassignment. No more department leadership, no client-facing responsibilities, no strategic decision-making. A new title, same pay, but his calendar was filled with admin work performance workshops and weekly oversight meetings led by Taylor. A soft landing, a silent demotion, a padded coffin for a career built on unearned confidence. I didn't celebrate, I didn't gloat. I just exhaled. Then the phone rang. My mother never called me, not first, not without reason. I answered and heard her breathe sharply like she was bracing herself. "Catherine," she said, clipped and cold. "We need to talk." I let the silence stretch until it felt like a tight rope between us. "About what?" "You know what?" Her voice trembled under the forced control. "What happened to Lucas's job?" I took a slow breath. "I'm not sure I'm the right person to ask." "You are his boss," she snapped. "No." I let the word hang. "Taylor is his boss." The silence was so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, "I'm in the mind." "No," I said quietly. "This is accountability." I ended the call. Minutes later, an email arrived, sent to the entire family. Subject line, "Let's talk about respect from Dad." 3 paragraphs of moral scolding, thinly veiled as concern. Accusations about airing dirty laundry, family loyalty, and how your grandparents would be disappointed. The irony that he was defending the man who repeatedly disrespected women at work was almost laughable. I didn't reply. Silence was a cleaner answer. 2 weeks later, I hosted a virtual all-hands meeting. Cameras on, recording enabled, faces tiled across the screen from different states and continents. It was routine updates, roadmaps, new hires. Easy. Until the final Q&A question popped up anonymously. Is it true the majority stakeholder is a college dropout who used to be considered a failure by her family? A hush swept across the meeting. Even digitally, I felt the shift. I smiled, not the Bisher kind, but something softer. "Yeah," I said, "it's true." I let the truth settle. I dropped out because I couldn't live someone else's life. I needed to build something that felt real. No one believed I could. But I didn't need them to. I wasn't handed this company. I earned it. Faces across the screen softened. Some nodded, some smiled. And if any of you have ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or told you weren't enough, just know this. The story they write about you is not the story you have to live. The chat exploded with clapping emojis, fire emojis, preach and affirmations. Somewhere I knew Lucas had watched it. Watched me claim space he never thought I deserved. Watched hundreds of employees applaud the woman he once dismissed as Natalie's dropout sister. And maybe that was the first time he understood the truth. I hadn't ruined his career. He had simply run into someone who wouldn't let his power go unchecked. A month passed like that quiet, productive steady. No drama, no family calls. Then came Thanksgiving. I hadn't planned to go home. I hadn't celebrated holidays with my family since I was 25. But then, Laya Lucas's fiance's sister, and one of the only people in that family with a warm heart, texted me directly. "You should come, at least for a little while. It'll be different this year." I didn't believe her, but curiosity was its own gravity. So I went. Same suburban street, same driveway, same house where my mother once greeted me with, "Didn't think you'd show your face." This time she opened the door with a strained smile. "Catherine," she said, "you look well." "Thanks." Inside, the atmosphere was off. Fewer guests, more awkward silences, less laughter. Lucas stood alone by the fireplace, swirling a drink, but not sipping. His face looked thinner, almost hollow. He didn't smile when he saw me, didn't speak, just nodded. A nod of someone who finally understood. Not fear, not anger, just comprehension. Laya hugged me warmly. Aunt Rachel offered pie like nothing had happened. Uncle Rob suddenly found the ceiling fascinating. Aunt Monica muttered something about politics and left the room. My father spoke less. My mother fussed politely. Even the air felt different, like the whole family was waiting for a storm that never arrived. We sat for dinner. My mother gave her usual speech, a tradition she never broke, but this year it was shorter, quieter. No shining comparisons. No praises dripping with implication. Then, halfway through the meal, my grandmother, the matriarch, cleared her throat. She had never in my life said a single word in my defense. Not once. "I saw your video, Catherine," she said. Forks froze midair. Every head turned. "The one where you talked about being enough." I waited for the sting, waited for the dig, waited for the dismissive snort. Instead, she nodded slowly. "It was good." 3 words. That was it. But from her, it felt like a standing ovation. After dinner, I washed my own plate. My mother approached quietly behind me. "You proved your point," she murmured. I didn't turn around. It wasn't about proving anything I said. It was about becoming someone. She didn't respond, didn't apologize, didn't argue. But her silence said everything. And for the first time in my life, I didn't crave a single word from her. I hadn't planned to stay long after dinner. I'd shown up, survived the awkward silences, endured. The sideways glances accepted the unexpected praise from my grandmother. That alone felt like running a marathon barefoot. But as I grabbed my coat from the hallway rack and slipped on my boots, I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the feeling of being watched. When I stepped outside onto the porch, the crisp, cold air wrapped around me like relief. Then I heard the door click behind me. I didn't have to turn around to know who it was. Lucas. He stood a few steps away, hands buried in his coat pockets, eyes fixed on the quiet suburban street. He didn't speak at first, and for the first time since the engagement party, he looked small. Not pathetic, not broken, just human. A man stripped of the certainty he once wore like armor. Finally, he exhaled and said, "I guess you got what you wanted." His voice wasn't sharp or bitter, just tired. The same exhaustion I once carried in my bones. I turned slowly, leaning against the porch railing. "No," I said. "I got what I earned." He swallowed hard, jaw tightening, like he wanted to argue. But there was no argument left. Not after the demotion, not after the restructuring, not after watching employees cheer for a woman he once dismissed as a dropout. Maybe he wanted to apologize. Maybe he wanted to blame me. Maybe he wanted to ask how I did it. But none of that mattered. He looked down at the ground and shook his head slightly, like he was replaying everything. The party, the speeches, the moment he realized who I really was. Then, without another word, he turned, opened the door, and went back inside. And just like that, the conversation ended. Not with closure, not with forgiveness, just truth. Sometimes that's enough. I walked to my car, breathing in the cold night air. For the first time in years, it didn't sting. It felt clean. I rolled down the window before pulling away just in time for a soft wind to brush across my face, and I realized I didn't feel angry, or vindictive, or even superior. I felt light, like something heavy had finally slipped off my shoulders. Because I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their respect. I didn't need their version of me. I had rewritten the story. The weeks that followed were quiet. No frantic calls, no emergency emails, no dramatic confrontations. There were ripples, of course. Family gossip, workplace whispers, old classmates digging up my name online and messaging me like we'd been best friends. But none of it reached me the same way anymore. I moved differently, worked differently, lived differently. My mornings started with sunlight instead of stress. My days were structured not out of panic, but intention. I carved out space for reading, cooking, walking, even napping. Small things, human things, things I once thought I had no right to enjoy. My boyfriend noticed it first. One night while we were cooking dinner together in my apartment, his arms wrapped around me from behind as I stirred the sauce, he murmured, "You seem lighter, like you're really here." And I realized he was right. I wasn't living with one foot out the door anymore. I wasn't waiting for the next criticism, the next blow, the next reminder that my family never saw me. I was simply living. Work shifted too. I began hosting monthly mentorship calls for young developers, especially women who felt overlooked or dismissed in tech. I didn't tell them my entire story. I didn't need to. I just gave them the advice I wish someone had given me earlier. You don't have to earn anyone's permission to take up space. The sessions filled up fast. Then I started speaking at conferences quietly at first, then more confidently. A few articles called me the anti-blueprint founder, praising my refusal to follow traditional paths. I didn't chase the attention. I didn't post inspirational threads. I didn't curate a persona. I just kept building, and word spread on its own. One night in early spring, I received a text from Leia. Lucas is doing better. He's quieter, more reflective. I think the shakeup humbled him, and I think you changed more than just his job. I didn't reply right away. I didn't know what to say. Because I hadn't done this for Lucas. I hadn't done it to teach him a lesson. I had done it to draw a boundary, a line in the sand between the woman I had been and the woman I was becoming. But the truth in her words felt gentle, unexpected, a small, strange comfort. Months later, I found myself driving through my childhood neighborhood again. Not for a holiday, not for an event, just passing through. I parked near the old Overlook, the same one I'd driven to after the party, the same one where I felt like a ghost in my own story. But today it looked different. The trees were budding. The air smelled like earth and rain. The view of town shimmered with distant lights. I sat on the hood of my car again, breathing it in. Back then, this place had felt like an ending. Now it felt like a beginning. My phone buzzed. A message from my grandmother. Not a chain message, not a group broadcast, a direct text. Heard you're speaking at that tech summit today. Make us proud. Make us proud. I stared at the words for a long moment, not because I needed them, not because they healed old wounds, but because they didn't hurt anymore. And that was the real victory. Not the reshuffling of corporate power, not the family whispers, not the viral speech. The real victory was that I was finally living without needing anyone's permission, without needing to prove anything, without asking myself whether I was enough. Because I already knew. I stood, wiped my palms on my jeans, and looked out at the town below, small, quiet, unaware that a girl once stood here thinking she would never escape its gravity. Then I whispered something I didn't expect. Thank you. Not to my family, not to the town, but to myself. To the woman who had survived the shame, who had rebuilt her life from the inside out, who had refused to let their story become her destiny, who had taken control of the narrative they tried to write for her. And as I slid back into my car engine, humming beneath my hands, I realized the sweetest revenge wasn't power, or success, or proving them wrong. The sweetest revenge was becoming everything they said I never would be.